Hello everyone, I'm Alex and this is Generation Vatican II, where we try to understand what exactly was said in the Second Vatican Council and how it affects our lives. Off again, but hey, I got another interview for you. This time it's me on the Gaudium Et Spes podcast hosted by Ches Filippini. I'll link their website in the description, but in the meantime, enjoy this interview.
Greetings, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Gaudium Et Spes podcast. We are so happy you're joining us today, and we have a special, our first ever cross-pollinating crossover episode with our guest here today, Alex Clark of the Generation Vatican II podcast. You might recognize him already because our Bishop Bill, was on his podcast in 2020 and 2021 to discuss, respectively, becoming a bishop and what that whole process is like, which was a great episode. And then also the favorite season, I'd probably say, of Bishop Bill, which is Advent. So if you haven't caught those, go to Generation Vatican II on Apple Podcasts or whatever your particular audio podcast enabler is on your phone or mobile device, whatever you're using, and go check those out. But we're happy to have him here on our turf today in studio. The Gaudium Et Spes podcast welcomes him. So, Alex, welcome. Good to see you, sir.
Hey, Ches. Good to see you again.
Good to see you as well. We know each other. We're friends. It's good to be in the same town. Alex was here for a few years, has been on away, but he's back in town for a brief visit, so we wanted to make this happen.
Yeah, actually, Ches was instrumental in getting Generation Vatican II off the ground. When I was first kind of not joking about starting the project, Ches provided much needed emphasis and exhilaration for it. He was very excited. Go ahead, do it, man. And then actually gave me my very first microphone to do it.
Oh my gosh, I do recall that.
Yeah. I've used it since then.
Yeah, the $30 Samson mic special off Amazon.com.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot about that.
It wouldn't have happened without Ches. A couple of other friends instrumental in helping me get that started. And that's become the, massive success that it is today, right? Yeah.
You bet. I mean, if you haven't checked it out, guys, he's had everyone from some of our mutual friends who we know from around the Pensacola area, just talking about life and everything, to Archbishop Broglio of the military archdiocese.
Now president of the USCCB.
And now president of the USCCB.
Yeah.
So a large range of famousness of the guests, I would say. So always great conversations, so please check that out. Anyhow, as we said, we're on our turf today. So it's our style, which we always start out with the famous line from the Vatican II document, Gaudium Et Spes, which goes, "The joys and the hopes, the griefs and anxieties of the men of this age, especially those who are poor or in any way afflicted, these are the joys and the hopes, the griefs and anxieties of the followers of Christ." So, Alex, your husband and a dad and a person working, much like I am. It's interesting to have a direct counterpart in that life circumstance. What is going on in your world, man?
Yeah, so not to get a little too, sentimental about it, but a big joy of mine is that I get to be back here talking with my good friend Ches and several of other friends that we've had dinner with, people around the area, getting to be back in my old stomping grounds. This has been really fantastic for me, my wife, my son, taking him to the beach. Oh gosh, he's living such a great life. Actually, so I'm from the Midwest, and so is my wife, and we were just talking the other day about like how much different his childhood is compared to ours. Because like if you're on the banks of the mighty Mississippi, going to the beach is like, oh, I've done that within the past 5 years, and don't go out too far because Mississippi mud, it will stain your feet. And now my kid is like, oh, let's go to the beach, let's hang out, let's catch some waves, the surf, and he's loving it. He is here for it. So, and Pensacola beaches, man, can't get any better than those.
I agree. They're kind of good for kids too. I mean, it's if you haven't been to Pensacola Beach before, it's like this massive, huge track from the time you get off the boardwalk steps or whatever, the steps onto the beach until you get to the water. That's kind of helpful that it's not like a direct kid into the water type of scenario. But I find when I'm trying to tug my my littlest around and stuff, they just it's a lot of steps in some soft white sand for them to get across. They get pretty tired, and I end up carrying them and the beach toys and the umbrella and everything, and it's a heck of a trek. So not D-Day by any means, not Omaha Beach by any means, but a little bit of a thing. That's cool though. We are glad to have you back in town. Our community here in Pensacola and many communities across the diocese are awesome. So it's been good to have you as well.
And what about you? What's the joy of yours?
Oh man. Well, I was thinking recently about so you guys hear me talk all the time about kids and all these kinds of things, and I'm about to start my 7th soccer season as a coach, I think, or something like that, which usually is a great source of anxiety because I'm always fumbling for plans and practice schedules and, organizing emails and all these kinds of stuff, all these things you have to do as a coach dad. And this was probably the first time where I was like, it's going to be fine. And I have no stress or anxiety going into the season. I've got other helpers as well. And I was like, all right, I've reached that level of dadding that I am not nervous about the new soccer season coming up. So
nice.
I can just sit out there, enjoy my son kicking the ball around with his buddies, and go Pelicans. I hope we have an amazing season. So,
well, you're one up on me there. I'm really excited to get to that point in my life where I won't be soccer because I don't know anything about soccer, but hopefully my kid will follow me in swim team and I'll be able to coach him in the pool. And that's what I am super excited to be dad coach. And no, we're gonna take the Pensacola Dolphins or something around and show them how to swim butterfly. And we're gonna go to state. Come on.
You're in the unique position that you were a nationally ranked swimmer as a high schooler, right?
I was not. Okay, so I was not nationally ranked. I was a swimmer in high school. Within swimming, and many sports, there are many different tiers of competition. There's you've probably heard of regionals and state,
right.
Okay, and then above state, in swimming, there's sectionals, which is a couple states in the nearby area, and then there's nationals. And I qualified and went to nationals. I did not by any means place or was ranked there.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I did qualify to go to nationals, which is a big deal for me. I'm from Iowa, so not much. It would have been a lot more difficult to be a state standout swimmer in California or Texas. Okay,
true.
So, but hey, that was nice. And then when I went to college, I was kind of burnt out, so I said, hey, like everyone over 6 feet tall. I got a letter saying you might be good at heavyweight rowing crew. I was like, I've never heard of this before. That's some East Coast stuff there.
Yeah.
So I did that for the next 4 years in college.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was my athletic career, the end of my tenure as an athlete. And then graduating college, I remember I was down here, actually, for my first job, and I was waking up at 5 to do a morning workout, and it took me about 3 months before I was like, you don't have to do this, man. You can sleep in. You don't have to be anywhere till 8 o'clock.
It's good. It's good to realize that at some point in life, especially early on in life. You don't torture yourself too much.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we already got to know a bit about you through that. Alex, tell us about, especially your journey in the faith, where you come from, raised in the faith, raised outside the faith, convert, cradle Catholic, and maybe conversion moments and stuff. So
yeah, sure. So I'm what you call a revert, raised Catholic. Actually, my parents were both Catholic when they got married. And then one of my parents had since fallen away from the faith. However, that was actually before I was born. They agreed that, hey, our wedding vows, we will raise our kids Catholic and then let them choose. So I was raised Catholic, First Communion, CCD, and confirmation. Got to do all that stuff. And then, like all my other siblings, our choice was the boring church or the rock band church. You can imagine what a teenager would really care for there.
The rock band church is not the Catholic Church.
Yeah,
just to clarify.
Yeah. The rock band church is not the Catholic Church in this scenario. So hey, went full bore in that. My wife will actually tell you we've known each other since high school, and she has memories of me telling her oh well, Catholics, you're all a bunch of Mary worshipers and you're all damned and going to hell. So yeah, and she still married me. So that's where I was. Okay. And then when I went to college, away from family for a long time, kind of finding my own footing, wanted religion to still be a part of me. But they didn't have, a free evangelic, non-denominational service readily available in the local area. Actually, kind of surprising that isn't there. But
I know, I am surprised that sounds like it's everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, there's this Lutheran thing. I don't know anything about that. There are these other things. I don't know anything about those. Like, here's this Catholic thing. I at least know what's happening and can kind of, it's the time where we stand up now, and now it's the time where we hold hands, and this is the proper response. Oh, they changed it recently. Okay, so that happened, and then fast forward through college. It was actually within a month or two of my graduation that my college is weird in that school ends and then graduation is a month later. Okay. So in that month time, I got to go on a fishing trip with my dad. He was in touch with some of his old high school buds, and it was like, hey, let's all road trip up to Wisconsin. We're going to go to my buddy's house. He lives on a lake, and we're going to go out on every day. We're going to go fishing, and we're going to catch our dinner that day. Okay, and we're going to have fish fries all night long. And it was him, it was my dad, 3 of his buddies, and me. And then we would stay up all night, playing sheep's head. And for quarters, and then go to sleep and wake up the next day and wash, rinse, repeat. And on that trip, my dad, asked, "Hey, do you want to listen to the radio?" Or
Dad, by the way, who's still pretty into the faith. He's come back.
Yeah.
Okay.
CCD teacher, kind of thing. So he says, "Hey, do you want to listen to? I got this book on tape. This guy, I don't know, Dr. Scott Hahn. I've never heard anything about him. Have you ever heard anything about him? No. Okay. We can listen to this." Or we could listen to the radio, It's like, yeah, sure, this is what you're interested in. Let's listen to that, sure. Silly Catholic stuff, It's important at this point to note that, the previous 3 years, I had been going to Mass.
Okay.
And that kind of, took my Catholics are Mary worshipers and softened it a bit. And that, so that wasn't wasted time, okay? That really laid the groundwork for me to be open to this idea that it'll stick with me to this day, where Scott Hahn points out that, hey, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. The beginning of the prayer that we all know. That is lifted straight from Scripture. Here it is. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's from, what? Really? You're telling me the thing that, people point to as Mary worship is just quoting the thing that we're all supposed to love?
Yeah.
And then the next part of it is just a prayer of intercession. And I had never encountered the idea of a prayer of intercession as a conceptual thing at this point. So now that's being presented to me is oh, well, I ask you to pray for me for something, and you say yes. Well, does it matter if that person is in heaven or if they're dead, I guess, we wouldn't want someone in hell praying for us. That's not going to do anything. But okay, the point is still there that someone in heaven, if you can pray for me, then so can someone in heaven. And I think we can rest assured that the mother of Christ is in heaven. All right, cool. If we can bet on anyone, we can bet on her. Of course, we can do a prayer of intercession. First half is quoting the Bible. Second half is just a prayer of intercession. Done. And I was like, well, that just kind of tore the cornerstone out of my anti-Catholic rhetoric, didn't it? I guess I really need to look at this more, don't I? So I was open to Catholicism now, officially, and thinking this might be something that I actually need to I might need to do in my life. I need to be explicitly Catholic and not, some church hopping Protestant going to whatever. And I don't mean this as a slur, because it was the way that I and many people in my family acted and still act, which is, where's a church that I find entertaining, theologically inspiring, and something that I would want to go to every week? Okay.
This is a unique approach to religion that I think is, it's maybe not part of all American history, but especially this is a unique approach. It's not just what I was raised in, but sell me. I mean, give me something that I can engage with and stuff like that. And
Pastor Bob, are you good at preaching? Yeah. Do you have insights on whatever we're reading through right now? And then maybe at a high point in the sermon, the pianist comes back out on stage and starts playing some notes on the background just to kind of ramp it up a little bit emotionally. And I mean, that production value, man, come on, it's great. And honestly, counter to your point with that just there, I would say there is a degree of that in our fellow Catholics. Okay, so
which favorite parish?
Yeah, parish shopping, right? So this is something that I've talked with Steve Ray a little bit about, and he helped change my mind. Mm-hmm. So I came from church shopping.
Steve Ray, by the way, guys, apologist, convert.
Spot on.
Very great speaker.
Yeah. He gave me 2 interviews, which was fantastic. Mm-hmm. Second one was definitely just him ripping into me for idiotic ideas. But so Steve, I posed the question to him. I was like, here I'm coming from this idea of church shopping, which is like, Pastor Bob, sell me on why I should stay here. I see a little bit of that in Catholicism. A friend of ours, he was very adamant of the fact that like he would not go to one of the churches up in Milton, which is nearby where we are right now, because their choir was not lofted in the back of the church, and that is the theologically best place for them to be. And he drove past 5 other churches to come downtown Pensacola and go to a church where the choir was lofted. Okay, and I was like, if that's not church shopping within Catholicism, I don't know what it is. Okay, and so Steve Ray came back and said, like, look, man, your priority is not to like go to your parish. And now I kind of talked with him a bit about this, and I was like, well, like in canon law, that is the ordinary place where you are supposed to go within the church building within which the parish you reside, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, that is the place where you are supposed to frequently go. And he was like, yes, but like if that church if the pastor there is legitimately terrible and preaching heresy.
These do exist.
Happen. Yeah. Kind of the source of our, liturgy wars today, quote unquote. If that's legitimate, like, yeah, take your family elsewhere, man. Do it. And I was like, that is absolutely right. My priority is to my family and to me before the church community and the church building that of the parish within which I reside, and blah, blah, blah. So, like, kind of coming back to what we were talking about, like church shopping, it does happen in Catholicism, maybe to a little more of a degree than it should. And I would say I still kind of scuff a little bit about that,
It weighs heavily on a lot of people, especially the folks who grew up maybe in maybe their family traditions more that ethnic Catholic, especially if they were tied to my German Catholic church in some place up in the Midwest or something like that, or my Italian Catholic church somewhere in the Northeast. When they get to that, when they move out of town or something, and they're in places where they have maybe 10 different options, and their family isn't around, it's like, oh, but can I really do that? Can I drive past 5 churches to go to one that maybe is more? And obviously, this is a discernment, like you said, to each person in their family. Like pastors have a geographical responsibility to their people within their geographical realm. The laity in canon law don't have like the same exacting obligation in the same way of like, you will, upon pain of excommunication, you will go to the closest parish to you or something like that. But I think it's a source of anxiety for some people, like where should I belong? But you speak though, just to go back a little bit here about church shop, did that Scott Hahn talk end in a very abrupt way, or did it take a little bit more unwinding to kind of stop at least maybe church shopping on a local level, but kind of convince you that Catholicism was the only way forward? Was that the decision?
So I said that it kind of like planted the seed, right? Yes, it definitely was like, hey, this is not only a legitimate thing that bears investigating, but also like this helps swing my needle in, I think this is the right way to go. Okay, not just something that I should be curious about, but something that like I need to give this a serious look, because that is probably the correct answer when it comes to the question of, like, does God exist? And if he does, how do I best worship him? Okay. So if God exists and I indeed should worship him, and like, how do I do that? Well, it's in Catholicism that possesses the fullness of truth. Then like, that's an important claim. And I really need to investigate that. And listening to the rest of that Scott Hahn book on tape, Mary, Queen of Heaven, I think it was, it just kind of convinced me that like, all right, right now I'm, 60%, 70% sure that I need to be Catholic. Okay. I need to be Catholic. So, and that launched maybe a 2 to 4 year investigation cycle in me where I was like, I think I'm Catholic at this point. I'm willing to like claim that mantle, but I'm going to investigate it a lot. Hey, there's this book called the Catechesis I've never heard of before. Let's read that. Let's talk with my local pastor, the priest at my church, and ask him some questions. Let's go to non-Catholics and ask them why they aren't Catholic. And then, like, I can't answer that. Let's take that back to the priest. And no, those were really good answers. Okay, like that was good, solidifying my base in Catholicism. Okay. And to that end, I highly recommend that people keep researching and studying the faith more, not because it's necessary. It's definitely not like if you can't enumerate the 5 proofs for Mary's Assumption, then you're not a real Catholic. No, absolutely not. But it helps you better understand God, and knowing God is another way that you can worship Him. Right?
This is well said. Some folks might be listening to this right now and be like, "Wait a second, but you were Catholic already, because you're speaking in ways in which you're kind of talking about an intellectual assent, a real owning of my Catholic identity." But you've already mentioned you were baptized, confirmed in the faith, and you were going to Mass for 3 years, even as you were sitting there intellectually, maybe with your arms crossed, like
totally in mortal sin in receiving the communion.
Okay,
receiving the Eucharist.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
and just sort of like, this is my thing that I do on Sundays.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is a huge thing. Like you said, it's not maybe an intellectual, exhaustion of all the truths of the faith and, reading every church father and memorizing, like you said, the 5 proofs and all these kinds of things. But I think you speak to a thing that every Catholic, regardless of their intellectual interest level, at some point in time has to kind of make that decision. Am I going to take ownership of my Catholic identity and build my life around it, whatever way that is? Maybe I have more of a bent towards service. Maybe I have a bent towards community building. Maybe a bent towards helping converts come into the faith or something like that. But at some time it becomes mine, and not just the inherited tradition that I received or something like that. So I think this is very helpful, because I'm going to be honest, Alex, not many people speak in as I'm sitting there as a baptized, confirmed Catholic going to Mass, and I'm really not Catholic on the inside. People are like, what the heck is happening right now? So it's very helpful to understand the process of real discipleship and conversion.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think to go on that thread, let's fast forward a little bit, okay? Spent a couple years. I've gotten married, and I'm living in San Diego at this point, California, and I encounter for the first time this idea of like not only a Sedevacantist, but also like the SSPX and Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre, Lefebvre, however you say it.
You can briefly define these terms, Alex.
Yeah.
We haven't used them on the podcast yet.
Well, again, this was my first time encountering them, so let's start with that. And there are also like Catholic communities that are not Catholic actually, and I was like, what in the world is going on in Mass in Latin? I didn't think we've done that for like 150 billion years,
In San Diego.
In San Diego, California, yeah. So, Sedevacantist, the seat is empty. Someone who thinks that the Pope is not the real Pope, and that actually we have a vacant office of the papacy currently. And then people will differ on how long the office has been vacant. When was the last actual validly ordained or elevated Pope?
Yep.
Okay. SSPX, the what is it? The Saintly Society of Saint Pius X.
That's right.
Founded by Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre, who was like, "Yo, Vatican II and this whole like Novus Ordo thingy, it's bad, and it's look at all the like philosophical idea of modernism that is now creeping into the church and destroying it from within. We need obviously we need to return to the Latin Mass, because that was what was going to buttress us against modernism." So I'm getting exposed to the Latin Mass now, and I'm figuring out that there's all this stuff, and I'm not sure if this church that I found in San Diego is like Sedevacantist bad, or if they're just like, hey, Vatican II we don't like bad, which is like still in communion with the church good. So I'm kind of like figuring all this stuff out. About this time, I'm 25 years old, I think. Yeah, 25. So if you're about 25 years old, take your religion seriously and start looking stuff up, because now's the best time to do it. I'm reading all this stuff, man, and at one point I'm about to leave San Diego. My job is going to take me back here, and I'm like, hey, this whole Second Vatican Council doohickey that's caused such a kerfuffle, let's read it. Like, I don't know how the councils are like promulgated. I don't know if they come out with a book and say, hey guys, this is what we talked about. If it's like court transcripts or like what I'm going to move into, but I'm just like Googling Vatican II.
Thank goodness
what do I
it's
look
not
at?
that boring.
Yes. and thank goodness for the internet. Oh, this would have been so difficult if I had to like go to a reference, like a library. Oh gosh. So about the time I come back to Pensacola, we relink up. I am starting to, I find the Vatican II documents on the Vatican website.
Handy.
Yeah. And hey, they've got it in like 18 different languages, each one of the different documents that they came up with and decided this is what we're going to publish, you know? And click EN, English, awesome, and I'm reading. And I don't know if you've ever encountered like an example of, wow, I am a terrible writer.
Don't say it, Alex.
Because when you read things that are written well, you're like,
you get
gosh, yeah. And the Vatican II documents are not those. Excuse me, the translations of the documents are not those. Yeah. Actually, I've since found better translations, which actually read very well.
Yeah.
And they're very nice to read, and they're I don't want to say flowery or poetic because they are, when they need to be, precise in their language. Okay. So I'm reading through and I'm like, this is wonderful stuff, you know? Like, I'm talking with my wife about it. I was like, oh, did you see this thing, like right here? And oh, here's a thing about how we're supposed to treat like other non-Catholics, and it breaks it down to like Christians, people of faith, you know, specifically like people of Abrahamic faiths, and then people who are like pagans, and then like what about atheists? And it's like how they all interplay with the church. Like the mystical body of Christ. And wait, hold on, this mystical body thing, like what is that compared to like the church triumphant and the church suffering and all this stuff and church church militant? I've heard that. Isn't that a YouTube channel, I think? So I'm like, I'm getting exposed to all these different things and trying to piece all this information together, which is fantastic. I highly recommend that anyone who has some free time, like just go into bed, read a couple paragraphs, maybe a chapter of, pick a document from the Second Vatican Council. They're really good. I think I love telling this. So I was here in Pensacola reading the Second Vatican documents, and a mutual friend of ours was like, hey, I want to start a podcast, but I don't know what it should be about. This is like 2017, 2018. And I was like, dude, I'm reading the Second Vatican Council documents, and like no one talks about that. You should talk about that. And he's like, cool, next recommendation. Oh, okay, all right, never mind, thank you. I'll take my recommendation. There might
be some listeners right now who'd be like, thank you. That's what this is too boring, but no.
Yeah, so I try to make it entertaining and bring in other things. So I'm sitting there reading things, and my buddy who had the idea starts off something completely different and didn't even make it through the first episode of recording. And I was like, well, you know what? Someone should do a thing on the Second Vatican Council, because like I've read, I don't know, 5 of these documents at this point, and like they're fantastic, and like more people need to read about them, because as I'm getting more into Catholicism, I just keep getting bombarded by more and more of these like, you know, Vatican II is terrible and the source of all evil in the world people. And I'm just like, that's annoying, and like I don't want to say that's right, because my immediate reaction to such a claim that the Second Vatican Council is the source of all evil in the Catholic Church as we see it and is creating a parallel church and blah, blah, blah. Like, my immediate reaction is that can't be true, right? I don't think so. Tell me your story.
Yeah.
All right? Let me hear what you got.
It's a pretty wild claim.
It is.
Just on the face of it, you're just like, whoa.
Yeah. So, like, this thing that I just came back to, this, the one truth, the fullness of truth, the body of Christ, bride of Christ Catholic Church, actually ended like maybe 20, 30, 60 years ago, depending on who you ask.
And again, this is perspective that you referenced to of this is not Vatican II's standpoint. This is the critiques of Vatican II, the folks who are on kind of the Vatican II ruined everything side. It'll be as far as like, yeah, the church kind of that was the end. You know, like at least the good times were over, and we're waiting for the restoration.
Yeah.
And whether that's to previous times or to new times that look like the previous times, but Vatican II represents a total break in some ways.
Break with tradition.
Yeah.
Hermeneutic of what is it? Discontinuity. Yeah.
On the opposite side of it. You know, as we talk about all these things, I think you and I are both in similar situations where I grew up in the same kind of context of I just went to Mass, I went to Catholic school as well, and did my sacraments, and then even my conversion experience, which I've detailed before in a previous podcast at a Steubenville Youth Conference during high school. You know, I just didn't know these things. I just, you know, I knew my mom and dad had grown up with the Latin Mass when they were kids, but they certainly never talked about Vatican II. And our priests at the parishes I was at very rarely directly referenced it, and if they did, it just went right over my head. So I just kind of grew up in what I experienced as a person born in the mid-'80s, which was Catholicism, which is a post-Vatican II reality. And then once you, just like it happened in San Diego for you, I don't know where it happened for me. It was kind of gradual over time. Sort of as that veil is pierced, and you hear all these arguments. It's like, what? You know, like what? How could there be such controversy, and how could there be so much acrimony over something that the Pope presided over, and you know the bishops agreed on, they voted on, they promulgated these documents, and then it just kind of it sort of spirals. But I think internally it affects. It's not just like an intellectual argument, right? When you come down to it, these things strike at the very core of like what does it mean to be a Catholic? You know, especially in the modern world, like how do I live this out? So yeah, I totally. I'm just tracking with where you're at. But to your point, and maybe as we go forward, very few people kind of have the approach that you took, which is like, I'm just going to read this stuff.
Yeah. Okay, so catechesis and education. Let's talk about that for a second. First off, I am fully into the idea that like no one today has any excuse to be poorly educated on Catholicism, because the internet is totally a thing now, and everyone's got a smartphone. You can do it on your phone even. Like,
you don't even have to be literate, pretty. You can just listen to things and watch
things. This silly guy has a Generation Vatican II website where he basically reads the thing to you, and it's story time with Alex. Come on. So, like, the educational value that is available to people today is astronomical. You just need to know how to hit the search button, okay? So I would like one thing that I really try to push is like, you don't know something? Awesome. Like, that is such a great position to be in. You recognize a hole in your knowledge, go fill it, man. Like, go find the answer. Yeah. What that requires is critical thinking to not just latch onto the first thing and say, yes, here is the answer, okay? So one thing that I glossed over was, you know, when I had just graduated college and I was investigating Catholicism, you know, I said that I went and talked to people who weren't Catholic. And so I pursued non-Catholic options. Okay, and I weighed those arguments, and I didn't stop when I was like, oh, well, your argument was refuted, boom, done. No, like, okay, well, let's get a better argument for that position on why Mary should not be the mother of God, but just the mother of Jesus, okay? Like, that's steel man the other side, to use kind of what's the hip thing to say right now. Steel man their side, which might mean searching out various sources and weigh those. It's time intensive. I get it, okay? And that's why, you know, I jokingly say, if you're 25, do this now, because when you're married and have kids, like, you don't have time to do this anymore, man. Like, you want to read something? Like, you're reading a kid's book 18 times tonight, and that's your literary exposure, okay? Yeah. So, like, go learn, expose yourself to ideas and compare them and contrast them and hold these ideas in your mind and let them battle out. Catechesis as like a structure within Catholicism, I think we can legitimately claim that is not in a good shape today. All right. Yeah.
I had it okay. Maybe personally. Most of the people I've met in my life have been in it was okay. You know, my wife, you know, she was a public school kid. I was a Catholic school kid, so I had a little more of an insider track. But I was like, what was your CCD experience like when you were, you know, I just didn't ever ask my friends who were in CCD. I just saw them at basketball practice afterward, you know. She was like, that was nice. I don't really remember anything.
Yeah.
You know, just not really impactful in a big sense.
Like, hey, go to this class like once a week during the school year for a couple years, and like, boom, you're good. You're done. Like, my dad was my CCD instructor, not because he was a bad teacher, but just because, like, how much can you cover, and how do you cover it well enough?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not a teacher.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would just, as a point of comparison, you mentioned your dad. My mom, who grew up in the late 50s, early 60s, like, I detect in her that, like, the things she knows about the faith were instilled very, very well when she was at her Catholic grade school in Reading, Pennsylvania, by the priests and nuns. That, like, those things stuck. Whatever methodology they were using, it just kind of went straight to her and has never left. And it's just not something that we probably experienced in our catechetical upbringing. Yeah.
Well, at this point, someone would likely jump in with the Baltimore Catechism.
Yeah.
So unapproved, unofficial, but very influential and good catechetical structure. It was just question and answer, and you learned it by rote, which children are very good at doing. Learning things to rote memory, and then like when you're playing it back in your head, you're like, oh wait, I understand what that's saying, and like I get how that now I've matured enough in the past 5 years where I understand the next 3 question and answers, and I could say like, hey, maybe we should bring that back. I'm totally open to that. Or like we find some other ways to do it. Back in the day, you'd walk around the church and you'd point at stained glass and you say, oh, this is Saint so and so, and this is Saint so and so, and that's why this person is carrying those 3 things, and that's like how you exposed the faith to your children through the art forms in the church. Again, modernism creeping into the church, which is not correlated with the Second Vatican Council. It was a timeline thing only. Has stripped away a lot of the art from our churches, which is a source of education.
Yes.
And our classroom education, we could say, is also lacking. Okay. Now, there's been a lot of work with Montessori education programs, which are very popular and have a lot of good things going for them. Like, hey, free idea, maybe your church needs to get a Montessori-based CCD class for your little ones to help make sure that they are better educated.
Catechesis is the good shepherd, folks.
Catechesis is the good shepherd.
If you have it at your parish, and your parent, please make use of it. It's incredible.
Yeah. And also, hey, maybe when people get confirmed, CCD class doesn't stop.
Right.
Maybe we offer adult RCIA, not RCIA is meant to bring people into the church, but maybe we have something like RCIA or just extended CCD for people through their 20s, so they can keep engaging problems and issues and arguments for and against the faith at levels that are more and more appropriate for their age and experience. Okay.
Right. I'll stop you out.
Catechesis.
The regular answer would be like, well, you just go to Mass and you hear homilies.
That's a good point.
And to some extent, that will feed us to a certain extent. But, you know, especially as you start, you know, our priests are given 12 to 15 minutes, depending on, you know, the...
Hey, Father, you're going too long.
Exactly. Try and explain the whole of Catholicism across, you know, multiple years and the scriptures and I mean, like, it's impossible to get a full picture of all these kind of, sorry, I shouldn't say that. You can get a broad overview through homilies and stuff, and of course you get a great sense of what the scriptures are about and the core of the faith. But, you know, as soon as you start poking these bigger intellectual items, you know, history elements in the church and the Protestant and Catholic divide, I mean, it's just not the homily's place to give like an exposition on the difference between sola fide and, you know, grace and faith and works all working together in a Catholic point of view. It's just not, you can't do that. So to your point, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, like, and you're not going to be able to do that by 10th grade either. So like, you better keep doing it after 10th grade into college. And so, but yeah, that's always been missing in my experience. And until that Scott Hahn tape was missing in your experience. So
yeah. So education, catechesis, things like that of that nature. So I'm reading the Second Vatican Council documents. At this point, we are back in Pensacola. We're hanging out some more, and I'm saying, hey, someone should do a podcast on the Second Vatican Council. And at one point, I was just like, did I just volunteer myself to do this? And I looked at my wife, and I was like, hey, like, first off, do you think this is a thing that needs to be done? And, like, should I be the person who does it? Because this is going to take me away from you. And to her credit, man, she was like, absolutely, it's a thing that needs to be done. And if you want to do it, like, go for it. That's and cool. I was like, I came back to her and I was like, if I do this, this is not my priority in life, okay? This is, not only is it not, like, 4th or 5th priority, okay? My family, my financial order to raise my employment, and then my podcast. No, it's not even on the list of priorities. Okay, when work and family life and things happen, things get delayed. So the break between season 2 and 3 was long, and the break between season 3 and season 4 is more so.
You'll be forgiven.
Yeah. So I said, all right, I'm going to do it. Let's do it. And Chaz Filippini gave me a microphone, which was wonderful. And some other friends helped me out with like internet hosting and things like that for a website and design and all that jazz.
Part of new evangelization, man.
Yeah.
It's in there.
And then it got started, and I recorded my first season, launched it, started recording my second season, gave about a month break between seasons 1 and 2, launched season 2. And let's go back to that evangelization thing. So here's a thing that we talk about in the laity. Like, what is your call to holiness? Is it to do podcasts on the Second Vatican Council? Is it to like be an impromptu and informal apologist who can go out there and hang with the best of them? Like, no. Your path to holiness is raising your family and living your secular life in a godly manner. Okay. Like that bears the gravitas that it requires.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So getting stuck in traffic is more appreciative toward your holiness than spending another hour studying the Thomas Aquinas' 5 ways for the existence of God. Okay? 4 ways, whatever. And I deliberately say this right on the tail of saying how important education and catechesis was. Because those are important. The true, the good, and the beautiful. Truth is important, but that is not your primary and ordinary means toward holiness. And that is really important. And you learn that from reading the Second Vatican Council. So that's one reason why it's like ranked priority not on my list of priorities, but it is still a great project to have because I am still reading a lot. I'm still growing as a person. I'm able to take that knowledge and raise my family better. And then if I have some time to record my thoughts and put it out there for everyone in Radio Land to listen to, like maybe one more person could also gain something from this and become better,
So this is a huge dilemma that the lay person has not had to face in the history of the church, which is, I would say you're right. The Second Vatican Council clearly addresses the laity in maybe the most systematic way that any council ever did. Well, definitely. Yeah. There's a whole document called Apostolicum Actuositatem that's literally just about, and then Lumen Gentium has a whole section. So it's very clearly laid out. But, I mean, the church has always said the laity belongs in the world, ordering their lives according to things, ordering the world according to things. But you're so limited, especially if you were an uneducated peasant in 14th century, wherever, you're not literate, you don't have access to a daily access to the scriptures, or let alone the documents of the church and all these kinds of things. As you said a million times already, like, now you do. And and you might find yourself with the intellectual acumen and the speaking ability and the interest and the passion and the connections to do some sort of. So you weigh these propositions like, what's my place, especially as a lay person, to do something like this? And you kind of, it's a little bit of the Wild West right now. Just the idea of us 2 laymen doing doing a podcast that is on church stuff is a new reality in the history of the church. But it just asks lay people, the modern world, the access to information, all these kinds of things, to take these things into consideration. Maybe your calling isn't there, but maybe it actually is. Maybe you are called to make the difference. It's the same way kind of where you began. You're not the only person I've met who was influenced by a book on tape, by a series of talks, by lay people. Scott Hahn's a lay person giving those things, and it just changed their life. And it's something to not kind of, it's not something to sneeze at, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Last thing to say about the laity, because this has been on my mind a lot lately, is that what is the best way for you as a lay person to live your Catholic life, to live your religiosity, if you will? And it's not, if you're an accountant, the best way to do it is to be a good accountant, be a good Catholic accountant, okay? And that might mean doing numbers all day, blah, blah, blah. That's not really anything religious. But then when you are at the the water fountain with your buddy chit-chatting. It's like, oh, well, over this past weekend I went to, a fair, and then, went to church Saturday morning and had a great fish fry and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh, well, he went to church. Oh, he's a Christian. Okay, cool. And there's just that. Just that little bit. It's like, well, and then when you get promoted or maybe the other person gets promoted and they're looking back at you, like, now the future of your relationship with this person is changed, however minutely or grandiose, because as you live your Catholic life in the secular world, you will have effects on people around you.
That's right.
So now my professional experience doesn't really, as much as the accountant, I have that same sort of level of things, of exposure, okay? I'm not out there, like, I'm not a writer, I'm not an artist painting, wonderful Catholic art or anything like that, which is a very direct way that you can use your employment to help a church. But like if someone, let's say there's someone, when I was in San Diego, there was someone who owned a lighting business, light fixtures and installations. And so like what he did was he donated everything, all the material to redo the lighting in our old church. Oh, wow. And the church just had to pay for labor for the installation. So like one day I walked in and I was like, it is so much brighter in here, guys. Like this is, and that is new. We didn't have that kind of light there. All that is backlit now. And sure enough, the priest came up and gave his homily. He's like, by the way, someone donated all this stuff, and we had it done over the week, and it's wonderful now. And it's like that was a very large way that someone who isn't directly related with the church can also implement encounters in the Catholic realm, because all of his workers came to the Catholic Church and saw the owner donating all this stuff to the Catholic Church. And he wasn't doing it like, look at me, guys. It was just like, hey, I want to do this, and guys, I'm going to pay all of you out of my pocketbook, and let's go do this. Mm-hmm. And that was that. That was a wonderful thing to do.
Uniquely, only a layperson can give that kind of gift, because priests are busy making light fixtures.
Yeah.
So we have a unique way of gifting the church in that way, which is, I mean, once you grab hold of it and you realize all the options that are at a layperson's disposal, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Speaking of all this, we're going to take a pause here real quick, guys, to wrap up the last part of our episode. We're going to add a familiar but special guest who has just walked in, and we'll see you in just 2 seconds. All right, guys, you know him, you love him. He had to come in because he's friends with Alex, too. So Bishop Bill is with us. Thank you, Bishop, for stopping by.
Thanks for having me. It's great.
Bishop, we've been talking a ton about Vatican II, Alex's faith journey, kind of understanding that, of course, he has the podcast that you were on a couple times, Generation Vatican II, where you've talked about a number of things. But one thing we were talking about today, most of all, was kind of the laity's place in this new work outlined, especially by Vatican II. Alex is a guy working in the secular world out there. I'm a humble servant here on your behalf. So we both kind of share this sort of, we're feeling our way through it. What's our role and all these kinds of things. So I don't know, as a bishop, if you wanted to speak into your impression about your collaboration with lay people, especially in light of what you've taught about Vatican II and all of your experience and stuff.
Sure, absolutely. As I said on the podcast, that was great doing that with you, that I believe, especially after Vatican II, we kind of set our sights too low, it seems. It's like, remember, after Vatican II, lay people can read now at Mass. They can proclaim, they can be Eucharistic ministers, they can be ushers. Isn't that great? And that's true, but it's kind of, we set the bar low. I think what we need to recall is that in those documents it said that the laity are called to holiness. We're all called to holiness, the universal call to holiness. So I think through the laity can really help to sanctify the world, to bring holiness to the world through your prayer, through your faith, your devotion, through sharing the gospel. And secondly, speaking of sharing the gospel, it's in sharing the gospel in ways that start in the home, at work, in your neighborhoods, in the stores, whatever. But I really think we need to remind and challenge each other and encourage each other to do that in very real ways, to share the faith. Again, starting with your family, but also, at work and in restaurants and shopping centers or whatever. So I think that's my quick answer. Yeah, there's a lot, and the church is calling us to do that, and I get it. A lot of lay people are saying, "Great, where do we go? Give us, not that they don't know what to do, but it's kind of like we've read it, we understand that. What is the expectation? And we need to articulate that better. I know we read bishops and priests, and we haven't done a great job yet of doing that.
Well, you let people do their. I mean, like, I think the first step is just kind of. I mean, it's obviously just letting it happen, because you have folks like Alex who are interested, articulate, motivated, good at it, and it's just like, as long as you don't go drop the hammer and be like, stop.
Right.
This is just the clergy's work. I mean, the Holy Spirit just keeps moving and rocking and rolling. I feel free in my lay vocation. I've never felt like, oh my gosh, I can't say what's going to happen or something. I'm assuming it's been similar for you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I mean, shoot, we were actually talking about this the other night. What can lay people do in a diocese? Because, so as we just got finished discussing, like, there's how you live your daily life, okay, in your work, in getting stuck in traffic, and dealing with your boss and all that jazz, and maybe your machine that you work on fails or something. Okay, cool. There's that. But then to you, Bishop, there are things that, like, what can we do in the church? Because there's running the nursery during Mass. So if someone has a child and they're like, hey, you know what, kid isn't enjoying Mass today, super unruly, we'll just take him to the nursery. Okay,
you're speaking
like
from
that.
Experience now.
Yeah, that's so true. 2-year-old. But like there are things that people can do. Let's call them ministries, where people can engage in a religious environment, in a church structure, and help bring about a let's call it a religious experience amongst their fellow lay Catholics. What have you seen in your diocese prop up?
Absolutely. I think kind of working off of that, it's to give hope and perspective to things. What I see is, so many people who are lost and confused and angry and anxious today. And so we need, and I see this happening on a limited basis anyway, I see people stepping up to say, let's talk about this. Let's pray about this. Let's not just accept what society is saying as truth, but let's study the faith together and let's pray together. I think that's another thing that people can do in small groups in their homes and wherever people gather. But I've seen that as well in our diocese in ways that in which people contribute not only to those ministries that you mentioned, thanks be to God, good lay people are out there to do these things, but also in prayer and in theology, in helping me to make good decisions for the diocese. I have advisors around, and every parish should have a pastoral council or a leadership team, and that's really helpful. Just recently, I've been thinking about, even today, I had several conversations with people, a couple priests, but mostly lay people, just about deep theological issues of our time. And it was awesome to be able to share that with people and hear their perspective, an author, a professor, a mother, just different phone calls or conversations that I had with people. So it's really a call to be engaged on all kinds of level, in prayer and discussion, theology, and in service.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Yeah, it's a time of, as we've kind of talked about already, I mean, the world's whole intellectual apparatus is a click away, and a ton of people want to talk about this, have genuine interest. It affects their life and their prayer and their sense of who they are and stuff. And the more that dialogue is open, I personally have never been bored by any of these topics. So maybe folks out there are, but yeah. Well,
right there was an option, Bishop Bill. You said that you meet with your pastoral council. Yeah. Okay. So does it? If someone were out there in a different diocese saying, "Oh, pastoral council, do I qualify?" Do you have to be a member of the intelligentsia or a prominent member in your community or possess any specific metrics or qualifications to say, "Hey, local bishop, I would love to at least apply to be on your council, and that way I could give feedback in a very direct manner and help the bishop in the bishop's guidance of his particular flock"?
Right. No, the answer is no. You don't have to be a part of that elite group. But I think it is good to start at the local level in a parish, because it's I guess more select to work here in the pastoral center. But that's just because we're we're one, and there are 50 some parishes in our diocese. So I think it's better to go to the pastor, your pastor, and just say, hey, I'm available. I don't know how you can use me or whatever, but I've been a Catholic for all my life, or I'm a convert. I've got some ideas, or I'm an electrician, or I have some ideas about this or that, and so putting yourself at the service of the pastor would really be awesome, and it'd be welcome. I'm telling you, because in a lot of parishes, you wring your hands. Okay, who can be on the council? I guess any volunteers. And a lot of times, if you just say it like that, people are intimidated or they don't. But if you approach the pastor, I'm pretty sure you're going to get a call back. You'll get a conversation going.
So, in accordance with the principle of solidarity, we should start at the local level and address our parish concerns to begin with.
Right.
Okay,
yes,
yeah.
There you go.
But to the point, don't be overwhelmed if you don't feel qualified for the job, because even if you can't sit up here and argue about whatever with the best, then hey, your priest, your associate pastor, through them, your bishop can still gain knowledge of this is a real, tangible example of the state of my church today.
Absolutely, yes. And you say you're not qualified. Don't say you're not qualified. You are qualified by virtue of your baptism. I love that Pope Francis has recently reminded us of that. It's not ordination or being in the seminary that calls a person to service at the altar, or the word and service in liturgy. It is your baptism that gives you that ability. So you are qualified.
Yeah, a lot of pastors get approached with you should do this, you should do this. A pastor gets approached by a layperson being like, these are my gifts, I'm at your service, is a totally different dynamic, and you'd be surprised, especially when the Holy Spirit gets involved, what could happen, what could be fruitful there. So, Bishop, I know you were so gracious to pop in and be with us.
You guys are great. I love both of you guys.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
We really appreciate you.
Talk about committed lay people right here. They really are. Not that you should be committed. They're committed.
It'd be one day.
Beautiful.
Alex, it's been a joy to have you, man. Our first crossover episode, and hopefully one of, I don't know, we'll see if there's more in the future, but hopefully you enjoyed this one, guys, and we will see you back in 2 weeks' time.
God bless you.
For more information, please visit the official Generation Vatican II website, generationvatican2.com. The Generation Vatican II Instagram and Twitter handles are @GenVatican2. If you have questions or comments, you can email me at generationvatican2@gmail.com. And if, after giving to your home parish, you think you'd like to support me, you can find my Patreon by searching for Generation Vatican II on Patreon. All donations will go back to support the podcast. These views are my own and in no way endorsed by the U.S. Navy. The Generation Vatican II theme song is titled Et Spes, composition, score, and performance by the musical genius of Brendan Flynn, whom you can listen to on Spotify or YouTube. Hope to see you next time. I'm Alex, and this is Generation Vatican II.